Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you the podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck. Giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Veronica Munoz. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So Veronica and I met through the Wise Women group here in Denver and have just gotten to know each other over the last year. So I'm excited to get to know her official story or more about her official story. And Veronica is the executive director of ACG Denver. So this should be interesting to learn about, well, what is ACG and what does it mean to be the executive director? But before we get into that, listeners, as you know, we always like to start with the icebreaker question so we get to know Veronica more on a personal level. So Veronica, if you wouldn't mind telling us about where you grew up, how many siblings, where you were in the birth order, and how you think maybe that shaped you as an adult.
Sure. So I grew up in Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago. I'm an only child.
Only, okay.
And, I've heard it said that only children are either very mature or very immature. They're the oldest or the youngest, in that kind of category. And as a friend of mine put it, it's like, I was born mature. I was always around adults, and it was my parents and me. And so it was all, I was a very serious child.
Very serious child. Okay. So what kind of activities did you do as a young person?
Well, my main activity that I started as a young person and continues to this day is dance. I've danced all my life, and it started with, I think I was 5 years old, and my mother took me to the ballet to see Giselle. And I was enthralled. I mean, I saw on stage, it looked like a painting come to life,
Oh,
and
wow. Left quite an impression, sounds like.
yeah, it was magical to me. And I didn't know that you could learn to do that. And I said, Mom, I want to do that, And she's like, okay. She put me in a class, tap, jazz, ballet, the works, and I haven't stopped.
Wow. So you started with all of those different, I guess you call those genres of dance. And then, and so do you still do all of them today, or did you gravitate toward one?
No, well, I did ballet mostly and a lot of contemporary dance. But, ballet is really hard on the body once you reach, well, some say once you reach, it's always hard on the body, but over 40, it's really rough. Although I did take classes right up until I moved here 4 years ago. So then after I decided that around in my 30s, I thought I need to do something that's a little more social than, be with a bunch of girls at the bar, at the BARRE, not BAR.
You think at the ballet bar, not
So I took up salsa dancing, and I got into Latin dancing and did that for 15 years. And then later on took up West Coast swing and hustle. And that's what I'm doing now. And country, also country. I've competed in country dancing.
Wow. What else have you competed in? All of those other ones that you've listed?
Yeah, and West Coast swing and hustle also. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you're at a certain level of dance where you probably can learn it very quickly, and then you can start competing. Whereas
I could. I mean, I'm used to choreography, and this was a lot different because it's lead follow. So this was a very interesting exercise for me, me, the control freak. You're trained, I was trained in ballet and any other kind of dance to, memorize your choreography. You always have to anticipate 8 counts ahead of where you're going to be. You got to know where you're going to end up. And when you're in lead follow partner dancing, I'm the follow and I have a lead, and he is going to signal me what he wants me to do. And I cannot anticipate that. So in the beginning, it was very difficult because I tried to, I was like, oh, I feel like turning, I'm going to turn. Well, no, you can't do that unless he asks you to do that. So it's terrible.
Interesting.
So I had to learn to be very present and in the moment and really, it's nonverbal signals, it's how connected you are to your partner, how present you are, and how connected you are to the music and how you're working together in order to get those signals and move in a way that is, just flows.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
and how was it giving up that control?
Oh, it's terrible. I like to be in charge,
Because
which, you'd think I'd learn to lead, but I haven't.
they can't you be change the roles and say, well, I want to lead, you follow.
Well, exactly. And I can, there's nothing stopping me from learning to lead. But, like I tell people, I lead all day long. I don't mind following on my off time.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Because then it gives you a different way to exercise your mind and your body then, right? Definitely.
Right. And as a ballerina, as a former ballerina, I love to turn, and you do a lot of turns when you're following, and you get to like the lead is the frame and you're the picture, so you get to like really embellish and style, and so I get to be flashy.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, I always ask for pictures to accompany the audio on this, so we're going to have some dance pictures from you. I'm sure you've
Oh,
got.
of course, of course.
Cool. Okay, so introvert or extrovert?
Oh, introvert for sure.
For sure. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I love dance, is because I could express myself without having to speak.
Oh, interesting. We'll have to
Mhm.
see how that plays out as your story goes on.
Oh, I was very anxious about this. It's like, oh my God, she's going to talk to me for an hour, and this is going to be public, and people are going to know who I am, and oh my God.
That's why it took a while to get it scheduled, I'm sure.
Exactly. I was very stressed about it.
Well, hopefully you're feeling more comfortable as we get
I
through
am.
it. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
I put myself in the middle. I'm a little bit of both. I'm an introvert, but I like people. I do like being social, I don't, but I have those moments that when I'm in a crowd, the worst scenario to me is to walk into a room full of strangers and have to network. I mean, that's the worst scenario. And I have to do it all the time for my
Isn't
job.
it your job?
It's totally, yeah, but by now I know everybody,
Oh, okay.
So starting out is always pretty rough for me. Like first day of school was really, filled with anxiety. And then after I get comfortable, I get to know people. But I do like people, and I love like what we're having here, one-on-one conversations or conversations in small groups. I like getting to know people. The superficial small talk I have no interest in. But I love to go out and especially dance all night with a lot of people, and then come home and recharge my batteries and have that alone time.
All righty. Well, I'm anxious to see how that plays out in your current role. So risk factor or risk meter on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you put yourself?
Put myself in the middle. I'm a middle kind of girl, It's like, well, Buddha said the middle way, Um, I- it's I by nature I'm a little bit risk averse, but when I look back in my life, I take risks. I think them through. I like to think they're very calculated risks. Sometimes you just have to close your eyes and jump. But I have taken them, and I haven't regretted that at all.
Yeah, very cool.
Even when they didn't work out.
Well, I'm a middle child, and so I kind of gravitate to the middle on a lot of things too. So I tend to always kind of put myself in that zone. So I can relate. I can relate. Okay, well, Veronica, tell us a little bit about what it means to be the executive director of ACG Denver, and then we'll go back into how did I get here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a very fun job. I mean, ACG is Association for Corporate Growth, and we are the middle market business community. We provide access to networks of relationships, and we also provide resources, but I think the key here is relationships. And I love that this is a group of professionals who service middle market companies and growth. We're private equity, investment bankers, service professionals, and it's all about connecting and doing deals together, whether that deal is, merger acquisition, or that deal is getting hired, whatever, it's all a deal. And these are people who build relationships, and that's how they make their living. And we always tell people, you know, you're not going to join ACG and walk into a meeting or two and come out with 2 or 3 deals. That's not how it works. It's long term. You have to put the work in and make the investment in getting to know people, and not just on a business level. I mean, the people who are the most successful are the people who they know each other on a personal level. They like each other. They understand things about each other, and they want to work together, or they want to refer their friends and their colleagues to them. So it really is about building relationships, and that's what I like the most about it.
And so it's about really, you're referring a friend almost versus, a transaction occurring.
Yeah, I mean, this is someone I know and trust, and I think would be an asset to you and would be of value for you to meet.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, let's go back then to junior high and high school. As a young person, what were you wanting to be when you grew up? Were you thinking that you would be a executive director leading this group of, middle market businesses?
Yes, that's what I always dreamed of, and here I am.
And then I set a plan out and I hit it.
There you go. It just worked nicely, didn't it? No, I wanted to be a ballerina, but I mean, seriously, I was on my way to becoming, I was 16 and I was dancing 5, 6 nights a week, and I wanted to dance, you know. That's what I wanted to do.
So is that what you went to college for then? Did you go to?
No, no, no. By the time it's a very young profession, especially in the ballet world, your parents have to make a lot of sacrifices. And there are parents who, their mothers give up the job and they move to a small apartment in New York, and the kid gets homeschooled and goes to class. It's crazy. And the kid, you're 13, 14, maybe younger. And it's highly competitive. It's hard on your butt. I mean, you can go on, and then you make no money, and it's a great career, but it's art, right?
Yeah.
My father was not about to let my mother do that. My mother would have done it, but he was like, hell no, you're going to starve. I was like, Dad, that's part of the job description. That's what ballerinas do. They starve. It's okay. He's like, no. And then, so I danced with a company in Chicago for a little while, but I liked school. I like being intellectually challenged. And so I ended up going to Purdue University, and my parents are from Europe. My mother's French, my father's Spanish, and all my family is in France and Spain and in Belgium. And so I spent a lot of my years growing up going back and forth to Europe. So I was raised in Paris almost as much as I was raised in Chicago, and speak both languages, and had a very European upbringing. So I was very attracted to the international arena, and I thought, well, I could do international business. So that's what I majored in.
Wow, two very different cities, major cities,
Yeah.
Chicago and Paris. But wow,
Yeah.
two very different cities. So do you speak both French and Spanish then?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Any other languages?
No, I love Italian. I can understand it, but I don't speak it fluently. But I can totally understand it, and I just absolutely enjoy the language.
Wow. Well, what a fascinating upbringing, man.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you get an international business degree. Do you go on to do more schooling, or do you get that first job, or what happened next?
No. So after I graduated from college, I got a job at a translation company, and they actually did some translation manuals for heavy equipment like Mitsubishi tractors or things like that. And I got a job. I know, and I got a job as a proofreader, and I realized, I don't like proofreading at all. And I was proofreading in different languages, So,
Yeah.
And then I ended up, that was a little bit restrictive for me. So I ended up being their office manager, because I realized I'm an organizational freak. So I like to keep things very tidy and organized and run things and keep on deadline. And so my boss realized, she'd probably be better at, managing all these different translators and the people in the office. And so I ended up doing that. And then one of my colleagues got a job as a recruiter, and she called me up and she's like, hey, I'm going to recruit you. I said, for what? And she said, Budget Rent-A-Car is looking for somebody to do some sales support. I said, well, that doesn't sound very interesting. And she said, yeah, well, they have a Latin American and Caribbean division. I was like, ooh, I want to get in that. She said, well, they have no openings, but you can get a job. if you get a job in there, maybe you can slide in. So I got a job there and befriended everybody in the Latin American division, and who are friends of mine to this day. But after a couple of years, I realized that there were no openings there, and I wanted to go to grad school. So I started taking classes to go to grad school, and decided to leave there to go to Thunderbird International School of Graduate School of International Management that's out in Arizona.
Oh, interesting. So then you had to move to Arizona and
I moved to Arizona, and it's right outside of Phoenix. It's north of Phoenix, and it's only a master's program. And I think it was 30% international students in the middle of nowhere. Back then, it was like the desert. And the campus was on this old, this old kind of airfield for World War II airplanes. And it was built, that's why it's called Thunderbird. And it was built on that. And I lived in a small apartment across the street. And you know, there were very few women, but it was very international. It was fantastic. I loved every minute of it.
so it really got those juices about the international business flowing again. And well, I guess
Yeah.
you're kind of working in an international company, but this is
Yeah, we were in this kind of island of, you know, the UN was, you know, dropped in the middle of the Arizona desert. It was just very strange, but very cool.
Cool.
And
So
it's fun because, you know, now I run into people, it's like, we kind of look at each other, you're a T-bird, you know, it's like we kind of figure each other out. It's just really fun.
yeah, very unique experience. I'm guessing it's kind of a small group of people.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the other.
And we're everywhere, all over the world. So.
Wow. So what did that lead to?
A whole lot of nothing, I'm afraid of, because I graduated in 91 and it was a recession. And I had actually applied for the Foreign Office. And I had gone through all the rigors of the testing. There's a written test, an oral test, and I think they have like a 15% pass rate. And I passed. And I got my name on the list to get into one of the classes, and the government shut down. This is Bill Clinton there was a government freeze. And so, I mean, what they should have done is they should have frozen everybody in their places. And then when the government opened back up, however months later it was, they should have taken those lists and moved forward. Well, by then my time on the list had expired. And it's like, you got to take the test all over again.
Oh.
And meanwhile, I had moved back to my parents' house in Chicago. You know, I was like living at home with a master's degree, no job. And by the way, there was a huge recession and only 30% of people, I think, graduating class even got jobs. And I did go back and take the written exam and passed it. And by then, you know, I was like, I really need to get a job. So I got a job at the, what was it called? It was the Chicago Academy of Sciences. It's now the Peggy Nortmer Museum. It's a nature museum in Chicago. And there was a group of social scientists who was setting up an international Center for Scientific Literacy in the Chicago Academy of Sciences. And I thought, oh, okay, so that's a cool place to work. Why don't I apply there? And so that got me into the non-for-profit realm. And I ended up running the office for these social scientists. And there were scientists coming in from, you know, Asia and coming and doing some work. And you know, it was kind of fun, but, you know, it was not exactly, you know, I had a master's degree and I wasn't making a lot of money. And a friend of mine, I was talking to a woman I knew, she was an acquaintance, and she said, you know, this woman I used to work for now works for the American Bar Association, and she's running this commission on women in the profession. And my ears perked up, and I said, well, I don't know anything about lawyers, but what is this commission on women? She said, well, it sounds like a very cool job. You should go talk to her, because I think she's looking for somebody. I was like, okay. I had taken in Thunderbird a semester, a winterim class on women leadership. And it was amazing. It just completely opened my eyes to something that I didn't know was near and dear to my heart. I mean, I was quite the budding feminist, but you know, we had women come in, you know, there were executives from Honeywell, which was headquartered there. We had the first woman speaker of the state representatives. we had just some women leaders come in and talk to us, and I was just transfixed. And I'd written a paper, so I dusted off my paper and I went over to interview with this woman who looked like she was a flower child out of the 60s. Here I thought, I'm going, it's law firm, I'm gonna be all buttoned up, I'm gonna be in my suit, and she shows up and she's like, big frizzy hair, and she's like, really loose clothing. So, and the interview was like, hey, so what do you think? And I'm like, I did this and this and that, and here's what I have to offer. I had no idea, it was like, and she hired me. And I walked into this amazing office in downtown Chicago, right on Lake Michigan. And one of my first jobs was, we're going to put on a celebration of the 75th anniversary of women's right to vote. This was 95. And Veronica, go. And I was like, this was part of their annual conference. There were 15,000 lawyers coming into town, And I was like, okay. I was like, wouldn't it be fun to like hire some, actors to do some kind of what they call, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like the integration theater. Like it's a reception, you walk in and they interact with you, and they're all dressed up in suffragette costumes, and they ask you, to vote. And there's other people getting on a stump speech saying, no, don't give women the vote. And we had, music, and we just recreated a suffragist rally, and it was off the charts.
Wow. Wow. How cool.
And I did all this research. I heard, I researched about Alice Paul, and I researched about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and all these amazing women. And it was so amazing. We had like 600 people go through, which apparently was a lot. I had no idea, but it was really one of those amazing experiences. And of course, we're dealing with issues, and it was shortly after the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings. And so all the law firms were like, okay, well, sexual harassment, not just law firms, but, all businesses were sitting there going, what do we do with this? How do we behave? And so we would create manuals on sexual harassment policies for law firms. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. This is how you should treat your employees. And this is what's fair. And this is what's legal. And this was what's not legal. And that had a huge impact.
Wow. So you start out with doing an event, a celebration, but then it gets into training and
Right.
leadership very quickly, very quickly.
Yeah. We had speakers come. We had an awards, a very famous kind of trailblazer awards. Ruth Bader Ginsburg came and spoke. Hillary Clinton came and spoke. Anita Hill. We'd have like the superstars come in. So it was very exciting. I thought, man, this is it. This is the best job ever.
Well, it sounds like it was right in a sweet spot for you too, in terms of it was that near and dear to your heart, which you hadn't really known, but it really was blossoming in terms of women's issues, but also organizing things, putting things out there. But then also there's a performance element that I can see that's part of this that's coming through.
Absolutely. It's interesting that, when I think back, it's always the show must go on, and you never let them see you sweat. The thing is, when you dance, you're doing something that's incredibly difficult, but you have to make it look easy. Like someone once said, if you look at the lead guitarist of a band, and he's riffing on his guitar and he's making all these faces, and it looks like he's putting so much effort, and it's just so intense, Well, in dance, it's the opposite. You get out there and you're doing something, you could be like bleeding toes and, pulled muscles, but you're out there looking light and airy and like it's nothing. So.
Oh, yeah, that is an interesting contradiction, or a contrast, I guess is the word I'm looking for, between the two. Yeah, because it wasn't, you didn't want to look like you were struggling at all.
No. And so work for me, it's like, okay, it's showtime. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to perform, and I'm take on this role of director or whatever I'm doing. And this is, we're going to put on this event. And to me, it has to be seamless. Nobody has to see how the sausage is made. This is the show. And our job is to make everybody in the show look good.
Wow. And anyone who shows up to the show, enjoy it, and the whole, wow.
And cool. Get value,
Yeah.
Right.
So you're in the ideal job. How does that continue to progress?
So then the floor goes out from under me. My boss gets promoted. And so my boss, who is this, kind of flower child, kind of really cool person becomes a mentor to me. And she gets promoted to director of the president's office of the American Bar Association. And it was like 6 months after I started the job. And I went into the bathroom and locked myself in the stall and cried. I was like, why things are going so great? This is a great job and I'm losing, my mentor. Well, and she's like, don't worry, I'm just a few floors above you. You can call me anytime, come up and talk. And the woman who replaced her was, it was the polar opposite. It was not a good thing. She was very controlling. She didn't like what we did. It was just a lot of second guessing. And I mean, it was just, it didn't work. And to the point where I started looking for a job, and I called my mentor, Patsy. And I said, what am I going to do? This is kind of miserable. And she said, look, I have a job up here. It's the president's correspondence job, and it's a demotion for you. But you can regain your mental health and look for a job while you're doing this job, until another opportunity comes. And she said, it's a risk. It's up to you. I thought it through and I thought, I'm going to take it. So I took it. And, so I took a downgrade. They couldn't pay me less, which was good, but I took a downgrade. But eventually she restructured the office, and I just went to her. I said, you know what? I've never done a budget. I don't know how to do finances. I want to learn. She goes, okay, you have the budget. So I got the budget of the president of the American Bar Association. I started learning how to manage a budget. And I've said, I've never had staff report to me. And she's like, okay, you go hire this, for this position. And I did that. And so I built myself up to the point where I was eventually promoted to special advisor, which is sort of like a speechwriter / chief of staff position for the president of the ABA. And that was an enormous learning experience in watching leadership up close. I was able to work with the second woman president of the American Bar Association. The Bar Association had been founded in 1878, and this was 2000. And we were only on the first woman president were in 95. Yeah. And the second woman president. So we're talking, this is an association of 400,000 members, and we have an advocacy, and we have a government advocacy office in DC. And so it's a powerful organization, needless to say. I mean, they have their own House of Representatives, their parliament system. It's a big deal. So, and that person's very visible. And whenever there's Supreme Court cases or any type of issue, they're on Good Morning America and they're being interviewed. So it's a very big deal. And so I worked with her, and then after that, I worked with the first ever Black president of the American Bar Association, Dennis Archer, who was a former mayor of Detroit. And that was a huge deal because when you look back at the applications for membership at the ABA, like in the 1920s or 30s, they actually have a question in there that excludes people of color. I mean, they don't outright exclude them, but they basically ask them. I can't remember how the question was formed, but it was clear that it was there for purposes of excluding people of color. And that was a triumph to have him there. And for me to work with him directly, I was, writing for them, shadowing them, writing articles for them, working with their schedulers, going on site and doing meetings. For example, I would go to the United Nations, that we'd have a UN Day of Law and meet with, people with officials at the UN on international law issues. I sat in Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's chambers with the president of the ABA. I don't know how many people can say I've actually sat in a Supreme Court Justice chambers. That's pretty exclusive.
Yeah.
But I have, and it was like, wow, this is very cool, and it traveled all over the country, working for the president and managing their schedules, their events, their just everything, their initiatives. It was fascinating. And it was fascinating to watch how, the older white men who were in that position versus the women, the younger people or women or people of color who were new to the position, how they functioned. And it was really fascinating, just, how easy and confident and just kind of, this is where I'm supposed to be, that all the white men were. And you didn't get that sense from the women or the people of color. I mean, not that they weren't, they were extraordinary leaders in their own right, but it was clear that we were breaking new ground and they were establishing a legacy. And it was all very fascinating.
Wow. It sounds like, I mean, and then to get to be on the inside of that, to see how the leadership plays out, as well as you're a contributor. So it's not just like you're a bystander, or, you're actually contributing to the whole cause and moving things forward yourself. So,
Exactly. And it's like, yeah, I felt very fortunate to be working with both of them and the others too. I mean, most of the presidents were wonderful. And they had their thing and they had their initiatives that they were interested in, and it's the law and it affects us as a society. So it really is pervasive and really impactful.
yeah. Well, I look at your background to this point. So you've got the international business and you're working and you're at the UN. You've you've been at the bar association for a bit, so now you're seeing all this legal stuff, and then you get involved with all the government. Wow, I mean, that's just quite the broad view of a business. I mean, it just seems like you've got depth and breadth here in terms of the business, government, and politics even. So wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was a very, very political environment. So I always thought it was a microcosm of how the White House must function. Doing appointments to key positions, and you had to balance out, who owed you a favor versus who really deserved the position versus who was going to give you a rough time versus who would really bring some shine a light on a particular issue, who was an expert. Yeah, it was just really fascinating.
Yeah. So a lot of thought leadership as well as influencing going on. Sounds like. Well, very cool. So then is that kind of the stepping stone to where you are today, or kind of what happened? It sounds like an ideal job for you.
Well, I was there for 20 years. So after that, I was asked to apply for the director of the Commission on Women. I was something like a project manager before then. And now there was some trouble in the commission. They had some staffing issues, and the director had been put on leave, or she was kind of on her way out, and there was some clashing with the members. And the Commission on Women had such a phenomenal reputation, and I was hearing rumblings of, those women, they're like getting all worked up. And I was like, no, this is not why we established the Commission on Women, so that people can say, oh, look here, those women are acting up again. No. We need to get back to the position of influence. I mean, Hillary Rodham Clinton had set this up, and it was considered, a very big deal to when someone from the Commission on Women spoke, legislation was passed. I mean, you didn't mess around with that. So at first I thought, well, I'm not sure I really want to do that, but I had been at the president's office for about 7 years, and I was comfortable. And this is another thing I noticed in my life. Whenever I get comfortable, which is always where I strive to be, I leave.
Oh, that's so funny. You strive to be there, you get there, and then
I crave comfort. I want to be where I'm established. I know what I'm doing, comfortable. And the minute I get there, I leave.
Okay, interesting pattern.
Yeah. So I went, and I was asked by a few people saying, hey, really, would you apply for this? The commission, you can help them out. You have the influence, the board of the ABA, you have all the relationships that can make this a success. I thought, hey, how can I say no? I loved the job then. So I went back, and so I did it wasn't a little bit of a turnaround in that sense, because there were some financial issues, and work and rebuilt the staff, and it was a commission of appointed 12 commissioners appointed by the ABA president. And we always had 2 seats for men. We always made sure we had men on our commission. It was really important, because you want diversity, and you want their opinion, you want their guidance. I mean, we actually are going through a system that is patriarchal, that was set up by men for men, and we need to know how to navigate it, and who better to help us than men.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And they were our greatest allies. So we always had a couple seats for men. And then we had a huge group of liaisons from outside organization, National Association of Women Judges, National Association of Women Lawyers. I mean, the Ms. JD, which was a student organization. And man, I mean, we did so much. And that, I think, I had a chair, Bobby Liebenberg, who was chair for 3 years. And she was such an inspiration to me. Working with her was a joy because she had a passion for women's issues, and she would go out and this is a woman who in her personal life had suffered a lot of, had tragedies in her family, and had difficulties, and she was so positive. I mean, she just loved life and loved what she was doing, and that just infected us all.
Wow. So it
And
sounds like you've had some great leaders that you got to work with that have really helped you in that ideal job or stay in those jobs.
great leader. I mean, we worked on the Paycheck Fairness Act, Ledbetter versus Goodyear, where Lily Ledbetter found out she was getting paid less than men, like 20 years into the job, went to Supreme Court and they said, nah, statute of limitations is up. You should have told us 18 months after you got hired. Well, who knows what your colleagues are being paid 18 months after you start a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we worked on Fair Paycheck Act, and that was the first legislation that Obama signed when he got into office. I mean, we did stuff like that, breaking the glass ceiling. We did a huge report on the experience of women of color in law firms and in corporate legal departments, and that was an eye-opener because women were getting into law school, and they were 50%, if not more, of the graduating class, and they were getting the jobs, but they weren't making partners. I mean, you could count the number of partners or managing partners of major law firms on one hand. So we did studies. I mean, it was fantastic.
Wow. And it sounds like you had good funding for all of this as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was actually fairly easy to raise money. I mean, you go to a law firm and you say, okay, how many of your partners are women? How many of your partners are women of color? And they'd be like, okay, we'll give you money. Guilt is a powerful tool.
Yeah, I guess. Now, did you ever run into any roadblocks because you didn't have a law degree? I mean, you are in the lawyer space. It seems like that might be something they're like, well, what's your law degree, or how's your background?
No, I mean, I was an association management professional. I had a business degree, and I did think that when I first joined the Bar Association, it might inspire me to go to law school, and it was like, no.
It's funny. I know we've talked several times about your kind of your history and your career and how you got there before this podcast even. And because you were part of the Bar Association, I thought you were. I just assumed there was going to be a law degree in there somewhere.
Well, and many lawyers do. They decide they don't want to practice, and they go into this. And so we do have a fair amount of staff. And it's especially helpful, when you're like in legal services or you need a certain expertise. But my expertise is running an organization. My expertise is making sure, coordinating my volunteers. I'm delegating up, I'm delegating down. My expertise is putting on events and raising money and making sure that, we're achieving our mission and our vision and our goals. And so that's where I came in. And the fact that it was lawyers, I think they did rub off on me, no question, because I have that kind of reverence for how a word is crafted, and thinking through all sides of the argument, sometimes too much. I always can see all sides of an argument. I have a certain opinion. It's like, okay, well, that person thinks absolutely polar opposite to me. Well, let's think about how that person's gonna feel about what we're talking about. So I'm always like circling around and really trying to take in all different perspectives. Yeah. And I think that's something that I learned on the job.
Yeah, which I think is a good trait of a leader, is to look at multiple sides of things versus just kind of having one opinion or one vision and trying to push that through.
Yeah, as long as you don't let that hold you up for making a decision.
Yeah,
the worst thing, I've witnessed this at the very top, of people leaders having a hard time making decisions, and rather make the wrong one than not make one.
Yeah, sometimes you got to move because you have all the information you're going to get. You just have to move forward. So,
Yeah.
well, very cool. So you ended up kind of coming back to where you started, but in the leadership role.
In the
As,
leadership role.
yeah.
And that was fantastic. And then Bobby, rolled off the chair position, and again, I was there 7 years and I was comfortable. Oh, it
Uh-oh.
was dreamy, comfortable. I knew my stuff, and I knew all the players and I had all the relationships and it was great. And so my boss came to me and tapped me on the shoulder. She said, you know what? The sectional litigation, which is the largest section, over 50,000 members and a huge staff, they're had to let go of their, or let go of their executive, their director left, and nobody will apply for the job because everybody was afraid of that. They're litigators, they're intense, and it was a big, it was huge. Um, and I said, well, that's a rough crowd. She goes, Veronica, the Commission on Women, that they had their challenges and you manage that. And I said, I understand, but this is a big deal. She goes, yeah, well, you'll be compensated accordingly. And because I was comfortable, I said, sure.
Ah,
And it was challenging. I had a staff of 27, uh, and it was a $6 million budget, and which was bigger than, my little $500,000 at the commission. And and there were some, clashes between staff and the members, and they were very, very involved. I mean, all the members there were very, very involved in the work. And it was sometimes it's like, okay, this is what the staff does. This is what the members do. Let's make sure you don't need to do my job. I can do my job. You
yeah.
know. So there was a little bit of that, and so I had to proceed to rebuild the staff pretty much. And I put together a team of fabulous people. I mean, I ended up, I definitely had my challenges in some of those. But I put together my management team. We would have our meetings and we called it the cone of silence, and you could say anything you wanted, and we had a level of trust because it was very challenging and there was some toxicity in the environment in some levels that I really wanted to protect my staff from. And I think the best compliment I ever had was my former deputy director called me the other day and he said, hey, we had a reunion with all the managers a few weeks ago. And I said, well, how was that? He goes, oh my God, it was magical. So these are people who, they've been through the grind together. We had some rough times and they're still getting together.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know,
And you created that.
I created that. So I consider that, my legacy, and I'm always really flattered. Yeah, I wasn't even there. Had I been in Chicago, I would have obviously been invited, but I just love that they did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it kind of lives on with or without you. And
Right.
because sometimes if it's always dependent on you, then that's not good either. Then you aren't
No,
leaving them with a legacy. So yeah,
it
that
has
is,
to be organic.
yeah,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
So
So,
you must be getting uncomfortable again because somehow you get to Colorado.
right. So yeah, I was there and I did that for 5 years, and I had gotten married in the interim, and my then husband, now my ex-husband, said, I really, Chicago, the economy, this and that, and we visited Denver and saw the bright sunshine and the very dynamic business environment. And he's like, I want to move. And, me being me, I sat with it and thought long and hard and weighed the pros and cons ad nauseum. And I was like, what do I do? And I realized I was comfortable in Chicago, and there was really nowhere else I wanted to go in Chicago. I've been there my whole life. I love the city and I love my friends. And other than my mother, I had no family there. I have a cousin up north in the northern suburbs, but I probably see him as much online as I would in person. And I thought, well, you gotta change it up every once in a while. And
Oh,
what
comfort. You were comfort in a city. I mean, that's different than being comfort in a job. Amazing.
and I
Okay.
thought, oh, okay. And I quit my job. He had gotten a job here and I quit my job. which also I started networking out here, but I didn't know anybody. And I
Yeah.
quit my job and I came here. It was very scary for me. I had never not always supported myself. I had never not had a job and or had some means to a job. And here I am going to a town where I know no one and I have to start all over again.
Yeah. So I would call that a risk level 5 and that stuff.
Yeah, that was a risk level 5. It was for sure.
Yeah. So then how did you land at ACG?
Well, I learned the art as an introvert, it was very hard for me, but I learned the art of networking. I just started calling people and saying, "Can I have a coffee?" I was like, and they did, and people were generous, and they sat down with me, and they met me for coffee, and they invited me to lunch, and they shared their contacts with me, and I just kept, I would look, I would apply, I would, and then I just talked to this woman this one day, and she said, yeah, I run ACG Denver and it's a great job. However, I've been doing it a while and I'm thinking of doing something else. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, you have a great background. Would you be interested? And I said, well, I'd love to learn more about it. People say that and then they don't leave. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. But I'd love to learn more about it. And then, fast forward a few months and I had done some other projects and done some jobs in the interim. I went back to her. I was, without a job again later in the year. And I said, yeah, I just want to circle. I just started calling people again, circling back, love to have coffee, love to see what you're doing. And she said, well, actually, I can't talk because I'm leaving my job. I've got a lot going on. And I said, oh, what's going on? And she said, well, are you interested in this job? And I said, well, again, I'd like to learn more about it. She's like, okay, next thing I know, she sends me, she introduces me to a member, but he's the head of the search committee who says, can you meet Tuesday? And I said, oh, sure. Let me update my resume real fast. And I met with them and then they were like, can you meet again? Can you meet again? And I got the job.
Wow. Wow. So how long were you in Denver then, kind of before you landed at ACG?
I was about a year and a half, maybe, yeah,
Okay.
but a couple of years, almost, yeah, a year and a half or so.
So the person that doesn't like to walk into a room of strangers walked into a city of strangers. But
Yep,
then you just kind of one at a time. Sounds like, one-on-one is your comfort zone.
very much
And
so.
and you just start talking with folks, and next thing you know, you find a role where now you're connecting all of these business leaders, and now
Hmm.
you're getting to know everyone in the room.
Exactly.
Hmm,
Yep.
very cool.
Yeah.
So, would you say that this is your ideal job?
I honestly don't know. I mean, there are aspects of the job I enjoy tremendously. Of course, it's hard question now because I'm stuck at home with COVID, as we all are. So I feel
Yeah. So the pandemic changes a lot of
it
things.
does. I mean, it's a state, and I've always worked from home. We don't have an office. And I didn't think I'd like that because I really do like working in teams. And I had a large team at the Bar Association. Even when I was at the commission, I had a team of at least 4 people reporting to me. And then at litigation, I had 26. But I do like working in teams and I'm very collaborative. And so I have one person working with me now, which is great. And she's phenomenal. It's just, I like to have more.
Yeah. Yeah. Bigger.
So, it's funny because when I got this job, I thought, oh, I worked for a large association. I managed all these, very demanding litigators and 50,000. Well, it wasn't 50,000, but it was the leadership. And wouldn't it be cute to, run a small chapter, of, almost 400 members, and that'd be kind of fun. I never worked so hard in my life.
And that's what you're doing now, right? Is running a small chapter.
Well, it's like running a small business, it's
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And you don't have the resources that you would have with a large organization and you have to be creative. And that's the fun part. We get to be, my board's very open. It's like, okay, this doesn't work. Let's try that. Okay. They're staying fluid. They're very open-minded. I mean, they're about making deals work. So, they're not obstructionist in any way. It's just, how can we, using our current resources, how we can deliver the best value to our members. And it right now, as with everybody, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and it's more important than ever to be part of an organization like that, I'm guessing, as a business, right? Is because you need to have all those different resources available and different relationships available because, things are probably shutting down in certain areas, but they're booming in others. And yeah, so
Exactly.
how do you
And
stay?
our most successful members are the ones, as I said before, who have built those relationships.
Mhm.
And when things shut down, they didn't sit on their hands. They kept working the phones and they came out with deals, so they didn't stop, and they stopped and they worked their network. And that's what's important to understand, that, you can, I mean, while this is very disruptive and it's really hard on industries like ours, which thrive on in-person meetings, and all the people we work with in the hospitality industry, my heart goes out to, because they're going through such a rough time. um, it's really important to have those connections and to maintain, whatever business relationships you have, because that's going to help you survive.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, this came up yesterday in one of my interviews. You're a leader of leaders. You're leading all these leaders.
Yeah, but I do so in a very kind of not flashy way. I mean, there are some people in my position who are, they're front and center, they're CEOs, they're the representative, which, is part of the job. But like I've always said, I like to be the power behind the throne,
Mhm.
because I think that's where the true power lies. I don't need to be up and center. In fact, my job is to showcase my members. My job is to put you on the podium, to put, the president, to put the people who are in leadership position, who paid, who worked hard to get there. And I want to
Mhm.
feature them. I don't want to feature me, you know. Everybody knows who I am. They get my emails, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So that's how I view it. And I view it as their organization. And it's mine too, obviously, but it's their organization. And it's, about making them successful. And if they're successful, I'm successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. Well, Veronica, I could chat with you probably all morning about this, but we do have to wrap up at some point.
Oh,
So
sure.
let's I'm gonna have to transition there. But I do think we're at kind of where you are today. So when we talked about how did I get here, um, but reflect back on us if you would. What do you think kind of served you best over your career? It could be a personality trait, a strength, or maybe there's a certain habit. But what do you think has served you?
Well, being an introvert and actually pretty shy by nature, I always think before I speak, sometimes too much, but I think my lack of impulsiveness, um, I tend to be very measured. I tend to not get outwardly flustered. I think some of my members have described me as unflappable, which on the outside, but not on the inside for sure.
Because of course you've got that ballerina training, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, everything's great and everything's graceful, but in the inside, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Yeah, so I think, and I also have a strong sense of diplomacy. It's kind of an exercise in diplomacy to manage all these competing interests and to make sure that, I want everybody to feel like they're getting value, to be happy. However, my ultimate goal is to serve the organization and what's best for the organization and its members.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Great. I like that. Those are going to be, I think, really helpful for folks. And then any other words I haven't asked, or that maybe words of wisdom that you heard at one point that really, kind of got you out of a funk or got you out of being stuck or maybe really sat with you well?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of as mentioned, a perfectionist and a control freak, and those have hurt me more than they've helped in many I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I mean, my perfectionism has helped a lot, um, but I think I had to learn to forgive myself. I don't like to make mistakes.
Mm.
And I had to learn to forgive myself for even small mistakes, big mistakes, whatever I've done. Because I said, well, I thought that through so long and hard, and look how, but I'm human and it's okay. People make mistakes. And that's what I learned from reading these biographies, like, Ulysses S. Grant or Alexander Hamilton, or, you know, these are people who, they had great achievement, but they made plenty of mistakes, and mistakes that cost lives, and
Mhm.
thousands of them, you
Mhm.
know? And so, Veronica, get over yourself. And
Well,
that's been a work in progress. So
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that part as well, because it is, those things can help drive you. They can help, make you be very thorough and well thought out. But you're right. At some point, they can also hinder you, right? And cause you to not act when you need to act, or,
yeah.
or to just beat yourself up, which is not a valuable,
No, it's
doesn't
not
bring out
helpful.
your best. It doesn't bring
No.
out your best. So, well, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing your story today. I'm sure that folks are going to get a lot out of this. I know I did. Again, it's so funny. I feel like I've gotten to know you in the last 6 months, but now I know you even better. So thank you for
Well,
sharing.
thank you for allowing me to share, and I hope this is of interest.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. So, listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted for other interviews as they're published. And if you have any questions for me or for Veronica, please post them on my website, lifestorycurator.com, and I'll make sure that she gets them. And on that note, we'll wrap up. And I would encourage everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and keep sharing your stories. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kathy.